Put impeachment back on the table. VoteNader.org. Independent presidential candidate Ralph Nader challenges Representative John Conyers in the Democratic Congress. Put impeachment back on the table. No man is above or beyond the rule of law. Declaring President George W. Bush the most impeachable president in American history. The independent presidential candidate Ralph Nader summoned the Democratic Congress to live up to its oath of office to uphold the Constitution. In a letter to U.S. House Judiciary Committee Chairman John Conyers, Mr. Nader laid bare the compelling case for impeachment. No other president has committed more systematic, repeated, impeachable offenses with such serious consequences to this country, its people, to Iraq, its people, and the security of this nation before than George W. Bush, said Mr. Nader in his letter to Representative Conyers, adding that James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, and their colleagues had just these kinds of monarchical abuses and violations in their framework of anticipation. Citing numerous constitutional law experts, Mr. Nader identified 5 distinct categories of repeated, defined, high crimes and misdemeanors, which separately or together would allow Congress to subject the President to impeachment under Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution. Dear Chairman Conyers, prominent constitutional law experts believe President Bush has engaged in at least 5 categories of repeated, defined, high crimes and misdemeanors, which separately or together would allow Congress to subject the President to impeachment under Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution. The sworn oath of members of Congress is to uphold the Constitution. Failure of the members of Congress to pursue impeachment of President Bush is an affront to the Founding Fathers, the Constitution, and the people of the United States. In addition to a criminal war of aggression in Iraq, in violation of our Constitution, statutes, and treaties, there are arrests of thousands of Americans, and their imprisonment without charges, the spying on Americans without judicial warrant, systematic torture, and the unprecedented, wholesale, defiant signing statements declaring that the President, in his unbridled discretion, is the law. In 2005, a plurality of the American people polled declared that they would favor impeachment of President Bush if it was shown that he did not tell the truth about the reasons for going to war in Iraq. Congress should use its authority under Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution to officially determine what President knew before going to war in Iraq. Your files and retrieval systems are bulging with overwhelming evidence behind all of these 5 categories. When constitutional duty combines with the available evidence, inaction amounts to a suppression of that evidence from constitutional implementation. When the Democrats were heading for a net election gain in 2006 in the House of Representatives, many observers of presidential accountability entertained the hope that the Judiciary Committee, with its new chairman, would hold hearings on an impeachment resolution. No way! The next backup was the belief that there would be an impeachment inquiry, fortified by your own op-ed in the Washington Post. No way! The next lowered expectation backup was just a hearing on impeachment, urged by several of your present and former congressional colleagues. So far, no way. The fourth fallback was simply a hearing on the criminal and constitutional violations of Bush-Cheney by your committee, as urged in a letter sent to you earlier this year by, among others, several of your former congressional colleagues, including Senators George McGovern and James Asbrook, and Representatives Andy Jacobs and Paul Findley, along with Rocky Anderson, former mayor of Salt Lake City, and the undersigned. So far, no progress. There is another option: do nothing. Since January 2007, the politically expedient option of doing nothing has triumphed. Volumes can and will be written about what can go down as the most serious abdication of impeachable responsibilities by a Congress in its history. No other president has committed more systematic, repeated, impeachable offenses with such serious consequences to this country, its people, to Iraq, its people, and the security of this nation before than George W. Bush. James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, and their colleagues had just these kinds of monarchical abuses and violations in their framework of anticipation. Declarations by Bush on the somber occasion of the 5th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq this past March 20th, 2008, demonstrated his criminal, unconstitutional arrogance and his confidence that the Democratic Congress will continue to be cowed, continue its historic cowardliness, and continue to leave the American people without representation. Even should he unilaterally attack Iran, the Democratic Party has abandoned its critical role as an opposition party in this and other serious matters. In a January 6, 2008 op-ed in the Washington Post, former Senator George McGovern wrote an eloquently reasoned plea for the impeachment of George W. Bush. More than 2 out of 3 polled Americans want out of Iraq, believing it was a costly mistake. Repeatedly, during the past 7 years, Mr. Bush has lectured the American people about responsibility and that actions with consequences must incur responsibility. It is never too late to enforce the Constitution. It is never too late to uphold the rule of law. It is never too late to awaken the Congress to its sworn duties under the Constitution. But it will soon be too late to avoid the searing verdict of history when on January 21, 2009, George W. Bush becomes a fugitive from a justice that was never invoked by those in Congress, so solely authorized to hold the president accountable. Is this the massive Bush precedent that you and your colleagues wish to convey to presidential successors, who may be similarly tempted to establish themselves above and beyond the rule of law? Is this the way you and your colleagues wish to be remembered by the American people? Sincerely, Ralph Nader, Independent Presidential Candidate. VoteNader.org.